for this prayer. Amen.
Amen.
And we're spending this time in this class looking at our Lord and the sacrifice He paid for us. And as we were assembled last week, we were talking about His time on the cross as He then moved toward the end of His life, and how at 3 o'clock on that Saturday, or on that Friday, He passed from this life. His soul went on to paradise, which we'll get into a little bit here in just a minute. And so that period, that horrific period of time, came to an end. Any questions about that before I move on? All right. So as we go on, we're still in Friday. Now remember, this will be our Saturday day period, right? From up until 6 p.m. They were in the second half of their day. It was the evening. And so Jesus then is going to be buried. And so let's look at that. We'll read the text and then talk about it. Several things important to note. All right, let's go to Matthew 27. Matthew 27, we'll start here. And we'll note a few things about Joseph of Arimathea. Verse 57. So Matthew 27, 57. The text tells us, when it was evening, we'll talk about that in just a minute, so just hold that. There came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who was a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him. Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen shroud, and laid Jesus' body in his own tomb, his own new tomb, which he had cut out, which he had cut in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the entrance of the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the tomb. All right, so if we talk just a minute here about Joseph, and then we'll talk about the tomb itself. So Joseph of Arimathea, what do we know about him? Some of the texts give us a little bit more. Matthew actually is the shortest here. It's kind of unusual. Matthew sometimes very long, has a much longer breadth of information, but here's one of those times when it's very short. Mark actually gives us a little bit more. If you go to Mark chapter 15 and verse 42, it's similar to Matthew's, but he gives us a little bit more. If you go to verse, let's look at 42 first. Now, how do you know we have not reached 6 p.m.? Now, it says evening. That might give in your mind, oh, have we gotten into Saturday? How do you know we're not into Saturday yet? Let's look at verse 42. And when evening had come, since it was the day of preparation, what day is the day of preparation? Friday. Friday, that's very key. What day is it still? Friday. That is the day before Sabbath. Sabbath would begin at what time? 6 o'clock. So what time did Jesus die? 3, approximately. These approximate times. About 3 in the afternoon, and at 6, Sabbath is going to begin. So we have a 3-hour window in which Joseph asks for the body, it's given, and then he prepares the body with some help of some others, we'll see in a minute, and it's laid in the tomb and the stone is rolled. All right, so we have what might seem a short time, but we'll look in a minute why there was plenty of time to do this. But we will just note that. I want you to note that at the beginning when it says evening. I don't want to get in our heads we're into Saturday yet. Why would it have been a problem if it was Saturday?
They'd be breaking the Sabbath.
They'd be breaking the Sabbath. And you also note this is a high Sabbath. What does that mean? A high Sabbath. Anybody know? it's connected with the Passover. So it's not just, I mean, all Sabbaths you were to cease from your work, but this was a high Sabbath. And so they would have taken extra precautions. Now you remember, why did the Sanhedrin ask for the legs of the men crucified to be broken? They wanted to deal with their bodies before Sabbath began. All right, so we're still on Friday. We're in that 3-hour window. And then verse 43 tells us again, just like Matthew, that Joseph of Arimathea came for the body. But he gives us a little bit more. What else does he say about Joseph?
He was honorable.
He was what?
Honorable counselor.
Okay. He was respected by who? Or as what? A member of the council. So what we can take from this kind of significant information is that he was a member of the Sanhedrin. So he was a member of the Sanhedrin and also a what?
Senator.
A what?
Disciple of Jesus waiting for the kingdom.
Yeah, he was a disciple of Jesus. And so notice how that goes on. He says, who also himself looking for the kingdom of God. To me, he's implying, Mark is, the Holy Spirit, through Mark, is implying he's a disciple of Jesus. He's looking for what kingdom? Jesus' kingdom. Let's see. If you go to Luke's Gospel, Luke 23, just to note a little bit more about Joseph. Luke 23:50 tells us that he was a member of the council, so a member of the Sanhedrin. He was also a good and righteous man. Luke goes further to speak to his character. And then what does he add in verse 51?
He didn't consent to the council's ruling.
Yeah, so what happened to Jesus was not something he consented to or wanted to do, right? That goes back to a man who obviously was looking for the kingdom as a disciple of Jesus. All right, so, and then John kind of gives us, if you go to John 19, verse 38, John 19:38, John just says straight out, he was a disciple of Jesus. But I want to hold on to the last part of John 19. Hold on.
Well, it seems to me that Sanhedrin court that was put together wasn't a legal assembly. And I don't know that Joseph would have even been there. They probably only summoned the people that they wanted to be there to condemn Christ.
Well, and so the night that he was taken prisoner, he very well might not have been, because that was a reduced number of the Sanhedrin. Now, the next day, the text says they assembled the whole group. So he would have been assembled the next day as part of that. But that period on Friday night, when he is being mocked and humiliated and going through all those things, it's highly likely Joseph would not have been there for that. Good point. I do want to note one thing about him, though, and John brings this up, and Mark does. So if you look at John 19, where we were, after naming him a disciple, it does go on to say something about Joseph, right? What does it say?
He was a disciple secretly.
He was a disciple secretly. Why? For what? For fear of the Jews. Now Jesus mentioned this, or earlier in the Gospels it's mentioned, there were believers amongst, even, as we can see here, higher ups in the Jewish religion, yet for fear of the Pharisees, the other Jews, they did not openly admit it. Well, Joseph is one of those guys. I'll give you another one in just a minute. But it says, but out of fear, he was not public about this until when? Well, go back to Mark 15. Mark 15 and verse 43. What are those? So in Mark 15:43, after mentioning he was looking for the kingdom, what does it say? He boldly went in. The English Standard says he took courage. So before now, he had done his discipleship secretly. This seems to be his first openly, yeah, I'm a follower of Jesus act. Now, why would he be afraid?
Member of the Sanhedrin.
Okay, but why would that make him afraid? I agree.
There's a lot of people in power in opposition to him.
And what just happened? They just crucified Jesus, right? They could just as easily crucify you. And they don't care about trumping up charges on you. They'll find a way to kill you. And so, again, before we give him too much of a hard time, let's at least get into the context and appreciate what he's faced against. And he knows, as a member of the Sanhedrin, he knows these guys and how zealous they are against Jesus and his followers. And so we need to be reminded of that. And so Mark tells us that he took courage and went to ask for the body. And that's what he did. Any other questions or comments about that, about Joseph?
Also in those days I read, I don't know exactly where it is, but I remember reading that they were fearful of being thrown out of the synagogue. A lot of the people didn't want to, like the blind man, parents.
Yeah, remember they denied, or what they said was, you go ask, you ask him. You know, he's a grown man. You go ask him. He'll tell you, you know, who did this. But they didn't want anything to do with it because, again, they didn't want to be thrown out of the synagogue. That's a good point. So a little bit about Joseph. I don't have much more about him, but I do have that I know of. Maybe y'all know more. So if somebody does, just raise your hand. But let's talk about the tomb itself. Today, when a loved one dies, what's the normal American practice? Right? What's the normal practice? They die, and then we send them to. They send their bodies to be embalmed, right? To go through that process. We then buy a very expensive box to put them in, or maybe we decide to cremate them, and then if we don't cremate them, we put them in the ground, right? Or maybe we put them in an ossuary, or something like that. So that's the typical American way to do it, and we'll have a wake and then a funeral, and then lay them to rest. So things worked a little different then. Of course, they didn't have the techniques that we do today. What would they do? Well, do you remember back to, this is going way back, but if you go back to Abraham, one of the things I find interesting, so in Genesis chapter 12, and it's repeated again in Genesis 15 and then 19, the three promises of God. One of those was a land promise, which was the land of Canaan, right? And I am fascinated. So God gave that to Abraham as an inheritance, yet did Abraham own any land in Canaan? No. He did.
Oh, that
he
cave.
did. He owned one thing, didn't he? What did he own?
The cave.
The
what?
The cave of Machpelah.
Which was what?
There.
Which was a tomb, which was going to be a family tomb. You remember, if you go through Jewish history, later on, Joseph, who, after the family travels, and Jacob does this as well, one of the things Joseph asked of his brothers was what? Take my bones back. And where were they buried? In the cave. right? And so a similar practice was in the first century. You had, I guess, I'm trying to think how to phrase that, but you had burial tombs which were carved out of the mountain. If you notice in Matthew, let's see, I'm the right one. Matthew 27, verse 59, it says that Joseph, Matthew 27, 59, he took the body, wrapped it in clean linen shroud, and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had cut, notice that, cut into the rock. And so they'd have these areas that were cut into the rock, and the bodies would be laid there. This is an example, not of Jesus' tomb, but this is an example of that style tomb in the first century. You can see it there. There's an opening that's been cut out, and there's a round stone placed just to the side that could be rolled in front of the door. Why would you make it round? So it's easier to, move, right? Big heavy stone, a lot easier to roll it than to pick it up and carry it. And so you have these tombs. I'll give you another shot of these tombs. You can kind of see this one where it kind of goes down, and you go through that door. And you would go through that door, and there would be an opening, a room. Now, some of them would have an opening room, and then you go back into the burial chamber. Some of them, I think you just walk right in, and there's the bodies, right? This is kind of what one of those rooms would have looked like. Now, if I can show you, up here on the wall, you see these cutouts here. There's some over here as well. But these cutouts were openings, flat openings, that you could take the body after being wrapped and prepared and laid in there. Now, Joseph, being a wealthy man, I'm sure had a very nice tomb that would have had many of these places. Yet, what does the text tell us? Nobody's been in there yet. This is brand new. This is the type of tomb possibly Jesus was laid in. This is kind of, I don't think this is probably, it's pretty common, in other words, of the way it would have looked. So
when I went to Israel, they had some tombs there that you could go in and view, and they said a lot of them, some look like that, where they have the kind of oval shaped section into the walls, but they said some of the ones that were very common is they'd be smaller tombs. They'd be like three places, and you'd walk in and you'd walk down the stairs, and there's just pretty much like stone slabs. And there's 1, 2, and 3, and they were completely open, like in the wall. They were just like stone slabs cut into the wall and then up. And they were pretty small, but they're like that.
And you can find lots of images like that on Google. And depending on what you wanted, of course, if you wanted a fancier tomb, you could definitely get that. And if you didn't have as much money, you could have a tomb, but it's going to be lower grade, right? And so there's lots of different images like that. I'm imagining Joseph probably would have had a pretty nice tomb, but I don't know that. But I'm assuming him being wealthy probably would have. And a tomb, kind of like at a graveyard today, what do we commonly do? We buy out plots for a husband and wife, maybe children or whatever. We kind of keep the family close together a lot of times. Well, these tombs are made for families, right? You would build it for that kind of thought mind. Look, go back to Abraham. He bought the cave, for the family. Sarah was the first one to go there. So just really fascinating. That stuff interests me. I don't know if it does you. But let's go back to the time. Now, like we said, we had 3 hours to get this done. Do we have enough time? Well, I think so. And if you go to John chapter 19, one of the reasons why I think that was the case, let's look at verse 41. John 19:41. Notice what John records for us. John 19:41, this is English Standard. Now, in the place where he was crucified, which is where? Golgotha, Mount Calvary, right? I can't think of the other name. There's another name too. He was crucified. There was a garden, and in the garden, a new tomb in which no one had yet been laid. That accounts, right, with the other gospel. So because of the Jewish day of preparation, notice that he's emphasizing the reason here that this needs to get done quickly. It's the day of preparation, since the tomb was what? Close at hand or nearby. They laid Jesus there. So Joseph, this was very providential on God's part to use Joseph in this way, or to allow him to do this, because his tomb being close by helped with all of this. Before we move on, something else. So who else was there to help? All right, it wasn't just Joseph. We noted in Matthew's gospel that Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, was there watching the tomb. But we know they did more than that if you look at the other gospels. Let's go to Luke's gospel. Let's see, wait, we'll come back to Luke in just a second. I'm sorry. Oh, no, it is Luke. I'm sorry. Luke 23:55. Luke 23:55. We'll back up to verse 54 just to reiterate what we're talking about with the day of preparation. Luke 23:54. It was the day of preparation, so it tells us exactly when this is taking place, and the Sabbath was beginning, it was about to begin. The women who had come with him from Galilee followed and saw the tomb and how his body was laid. All right, so if you look in your gospel and you back up just to the previous context, you find out who those ladies were. Who were they? Just back up a couple verses. They were the same people that traveled with him. Who were they? Mary Magdalene and Mary, right? So they were there. They watched what happened. They watched the linen being wrapped and then the body placed in. Then the text goes on to say in verse 56, they returned and prepared spices and ointments to put onto the body. And why would you do that? To deal with the smell, right? But they're not the only ones involved. I think it's also interesting. There's another wealthy Sanhedrin member. If you go to John 19, John 19. This guy gets mentioned twice in John. None of the other Gospels mention him. But he's mentioned twice in John's Gospel. If you go to John 19, verse 39. So prior to this, you had Joseph going to ask for the body and receiving it. Then John 19:39, Nicodemus, who earlier had come to Jesus by night, came bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds in weight. That's significant. That's expensive. And I don't know if that's the stuff that Mary prepared or not. Maybe they had their own. I don't know. But we know that Barnabas contributed to his burial as well. Interesting, that's the two mentions of Barnabas. I have no more knowledge what happened after this. Maybe somebody else has studied that. But as far as I know, he kind of disappears after this. But he's here at the end after the death of Jesus, helping to prepare the body. Shows at least something on his part. Again, another man who, out of fear, hadn't openly defended Jesus or or become a disciple, but here at the end, he's kind of another kind of guy who takes courage to come out and to do this. Any other questions about that? All right, y'all quiet today. Thinking about contemplating. All right, so again, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, I just want to, one of the things that's just neat, you read through this, Mary Magdalene is there the whole time. Like, she is there all the time. She's a constant figure here at the end. And so is Mary, the mother of James and Joseph as well. Yes, sir?
That's kind of the way funerals are. If you look at a funeral, even in the States, what do the men do? They stand over in the corner talking to one another. It's the women that do all the work. And you can see all through this, from this crucifixion, the whole scene, it's always the women that's really being, taken note of.
Yeah.
You don't see Peter and Andrew and them doing. They're not even in the text.
Well, I don't want to dismay Joseph and Barnabas what they were doing, but I get your point. Yeah, it really does demonstrate the faith of these women. They've been there the whole way through, and they were there during the trial. They were there during the mock trials, to the way up to the mountain to being crucified. They stayed there pretty much the whole time. And you're going to see Mary Magdalene. She's there. Oh. She's kind of there the whole time. There she is as well. And then finally, we have the stone being rolled into place. You remember the stone, that round rock? I'm assuming it was very similar to the one we see, but I'm not exactly sure because I don't know what tomb he was actually put in. But it had a similar stone rolled in the front over the entrance to Jesus' tomb. And then at that point, we kind of get the idea that it was time for the Sabbath. And so the disciples probably went to do what they were supposed to do, and that was to partake of the Passover. Can you imagine what, or to continue the observance of the Passover? Can you imagine what that Saturday was like, that Sabbath day for them? You get in the mind of Mary, of the other women. You get in the mindset of Peter, who's already, you think of all the stuff he's been through. They're going to be dealing with all that all through the day. Contemplate. Now, what do they think? Their mindset is, he's gone. What do we do now?
Go back fishing.
Yeah, that's what we do.
We'll get to fishing in a little bit. So, we roll over, 6 p.m. comes, and the new day begins, and it's Saturday. And of course, as good Jews, the Pharisees observed the Sabbath as it should be.
At 6 p.m.
Did we actually catch them breaking the Sabbath? Or at least their view of how you're to partake of it? Let's see what they do. Let's go to a couple different places here. Let's see, Matthew 27. Matthew 27. And Matthew here gives us the most information about what happened after the burial on the Sabbath. Just real quickly, I'm just going to note these. You can go back and look, but Mark does record in Mark 16:1 that the Sabbath had come, and then when it was past, it's at that point they go back to the tomb. The women do. In Luke 23:56, again, it's a very similar thing. The women wait until Sunday to go back. But the Pharisees or the Sanhedrin's not done. They're worried, and we'll see why. Let's go to Matthew 27:62. The next day. So what day are we on? Sabbath. We're in the Sabbath. That is after, note that, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember how that impostor said that while he was still alive, after 3 days I will rise." Now, before I get into that, do they have ample evidence for him saying that? Well, obviously, yes. I just want to give a sampling of a few places when Jesus clearly did say, after 3 days, I'm going to rise. If you go to Matthew, these are just in Matthew. You can go look at the other Gospels. I'm just going to give you Matthew, some of the ones he mentioned. Matthew 12 and verse 40. Matthew 12, 40. What's he comparing himself to in this text? Do you know?
Jonah.
To Jonah. Exactly. He says, Matthew 12, 40, this English Standard. For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Right, so he's making this comparison to Jonah. What did Jonah do after 3 days? He came back out, right? The fish spit him up. All right? Matthew 16, 21. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples. Now, I want to note that just for a minute. I'm going to come back to that. Just remember that. He showed to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed. Now, notice, and on the 3rd day be raised. Now, who was he teaching that to? His disciples. Yet, who has a better comprehension of what he's talking about? The Pharisees, his enemy, or those who made themselves enemies of him. His disciples didn't even get it. That's not the only time he tells them that, by the way. Let's go on to Matthew. In Matthew 17, we're just a little bit further ahead. This is after the Transfiguration. In Matthew 17, verse 22. As they were gathering in Galilee, who's gathering? The disciples. Jesus said to them, the Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him. And he will be raised on the 3rd day. But notice they were greatly distressed. They were upset. But they didn't really understand. By the way, how do we know they didn't understand? Because they were surprised. Instead of all of them being around the tomb, just waiting, that's where they all should have been, right? They all should have been sitting there in front of the tomb. You're like that person, you know, just waiting for that to open up. That's where they should have been. Should have been ready to have a party out there, right? A celebration. That's not where they were. And they're astonished. They're disbelieving. You remember Thomas, and I don't think he's the only one who thought this, but what did he say? He says, I'll never believe unless I have absolute proof. I just want to note that difference. So that's Matthew 17. If you go on to Matthew 20, the last one I'll give you on this. Matthew 20, verse 17. And as Jesus was going up to Jerusalem, he took, notice the purposefulness of Jesus here. He's very deliberate. He took the 12 disciples aside on the way and said to them, see, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over the chief priests and scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified. How much more direct can he be? That's exactly what happened, isn't it? Isn't that? He's being very prophetic here. He knows what's going to happen. He gives them everything that occurred, even a chronological order.
Amen.
And he will be raised on the 3rd day. So I could see being distressed and horrified that he's going to have to go through those first things, but that they were given the end. He'll be raised on the 3rd day. And that seems to have been one of those things they heard and kind of went out one ear, or came in one ear, went out the other. But it's kind of amazing that the enemies of Jesus heard it and knew what he said. Now, they didn't believe he was really going to raise in the resurrection sense, but they thought what? Well, let's go back to Matthew 27. All right, I know you got me there. I got 5 minutes to at least finish this. All right, so let's go back to Matthew 27. All right, so verse 63, they say, we know that this impostor, they said while he was still alive, after 3 days he'll rise. They're directly quoting, almost directly quoting what he said. Verse 64, therefore, order the tomb to be made secure until the third day, lest his disciples go and steal him away and tell the people, he has risen from the dead, and the last fraud will be worse than the first. Pilate said to them, you have a guard of soldiers, go make it as secure as you can. So they went and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone and setting a guard. So, did they just violate something that they firmly believed in? Now, I don't think they're actually violating the Sabbath here, but they're violating their view of the Sabbath. Do you remember? They got on his disciples for doing what? For just eating grain. They got mad at him because he gave somebody who was lame the ability to walk again, right? They were ready to kill him then. And yet, they feel okay to go and to set a guard and to seal the tomb on the Sabbath. They would have considered that what? Work. And they would have considered that a violation. Now, what does the Mosaic covenant say about violating the Sabbath?
You should be stoned.
You should be stoned. You go to Numbers, there's a young man who decided to do that, and he was stoned.
That is such a...
So, it's interesting that they're willing to violate when they need to, but everybody else, you need to do what we tell you to. So they set this guard, they sealed the tomb. Now, what exactly does it mean they sealed the tomb? There's no definitive way to know, as far as I know. There's some thought that maybe there was some kind of sealant that they could have used to put around the rock to make sure. I don't know exactly what it was that they did to the tomb, but in some way they felt assured that if this stone was moved, or either it wouldn't be able to be moved, or if it was, we'd know. They also set a guard over the tomb. Now this guard, I'll just say this real quickly. What guard were they using? They did have a temple guard they could have used. They also, the text, so in the text there's some ambiguity. I don't know if Pilate is saying to them, here are some soldiers, go take it and make the tomb secure. Or if he's saying to them, you have your own guard and you go set it secure. The text, as far as I know, is not definitive. It can be taken either way. Not that it matters one big way or the other, just want to note that. But they do seal it and they make it secure as they know how.
No way you had to ask Pilate's permission to use their own guard, would they?
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah. I've always taken it, they wanted Pilate to put Roman soldiers there.
That would be my opinion, but again, it's an opinion. I agree with your thought there. Good thoughts. So they do that, they set the seal, and then what happens? It's already there. As Jesus, during this whole time period, is in Hades, in paradise. And there he lays at rest until the coming day. We'll go ahead and stop there, and then so next week we're going to look at we went through the turmoil of Friday. Now we get to look at the joy of what happened on Sunday and going forward. So we'll discuss the actual resurrection next Wednesday night. Thank you guys for your comments and attention, and look forward to next week. In just a couple of minutes, we'll sing a song together, and then we'll have our devotional time. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure.